I'd like to welcome everyone to the second session. This is a training and orientation on the Zero-Based Policy Review. We're recording it for those people who don't get a chance to see it. The idea is that everybody who participates in the review in any manner, shape, or form needs to be trained in it beforehand. So what you're saving yourself is an hour of sitting down in front of a video machine and I guess the excitement of watching me live. In any case, I'm Commander Bruce Deutsch. I'm the Executive Officer of the BUPERS 47 Reserve Unit, and I was brought in to lead this project, and this presentation is part of an overall system that we've designed to allow us to accomplish the review of the policies and do it in-house with in-house resources. So what we want to do is get into the presentation itself.
Purpose of the briefing, first of all, to provide orientation in the review. Next, to provide training for the participants. Hopefully between today and tomorrow, and whoever sees the videotape we're making will catch all the people who will be involved either as cognizant code, subject matter experts, or interested parties in any of the articles or instructions that we're going to be working with. And we want to minimize the explanation to team members. We're already working with a group of people who are great people, so that means they've got other things to do during the day. And whenever they have to work on one of these articles, the idea was to get them in and out in a hurry. We didn't want to have them explain the terminology, the concept, and the process. We hope that you all will come away with that. And as we go through, if you have any questions, let me know so we can make sure we settle those. And lastly, to initiate the next phase of the policy review. We've been priming the system, setting up the systems, and we believe we're about ready to go ahead with it. Background, first of all, this came from Admiral Zadiper. About 2 years ago, he voiced the desire to review all of our personnel policies, but as the case was, there wasn't enough money for that at the time or resources. With that in mind, the assignment QMB, as part of the TQL process, which is kind of our launching point here, took a look at the various manuals that existed out there, the military personnel manual, transfer manuals, and distribution manuals, and realized there was a lot of inconsistencies, duplication, and just in general, too many places for somebody to go to try and get information. So what they recommended, they called for a reformatting of the MILPERS man, pulling into the MILPERS man the enlisted and officer transfer manuals and enlisted and officer distribution manuals. And they said, and by the way, this would be a perfect opportunity to conduct your zero-based policy review. They brought that before the Executive Steering Committee, and the Executive Steering Committee said on 10 May 93 that the review was agreed as necessary regardless of the final output in terms of format or distribution. So they said go ahead with it. At that time, and actually before the charter was signed, they looked to do a reservist. I brought a reservist in, and that's myself. I'm Commander Bruce Deutsch, and I'm the Executive Officer of the PERS 47 Reserve Unit here. And PERS 4 owns most of the reserve units, and they found me and brought me on board, and I came in January. We got the charter signed on 19 January. Admiral McKinney signed it. And project approval essentially came in a couple of steps. We briefed in April to Admiral McKinney what we proposed, and he loved it. That's the words I got from him. And the Executive Steering Committee then got a briefing last Friday. And the reason that there was such short notice for this was we wanted to make sure that there were no problems and everything was on board before we assumed to go ahead and give the command presentations. The perspective, first of all, there's a national performance review that breaks itself down to the DoD performance review. This is Vice President Gore's Reinventing Government. And I think the biggest implication for everybody here is that within the next 3 years we're going to have to reduce the number of instructions by 50%. So that means that we're going to have to do a lot of changing in the way we have our world up there for policies and procedures. And I think that's a positive thing, and I think as we go along we'll be able to not only do that, but do it within the context of improving the overall system. Next, the Air Force just completed, what this basically means is that other services are involved in this also, completed a project where they completely rewrote all of their policy directives and instructions throughout the entire Air Force. And we've done a lot of coordination with them to get an idea of what they did right and wrong, and they gave us their lessons learned, and a lot of the things we have here have picked up on that. But I think the big thing is that this is something that is going to happen. What it means is that this is not just a nice to have, it's really something that needs to take place. The technology is really sparking right about now. If you go around, there's millions of people that want to sell you things dealing with CD-ROMs and dealing with the technology to access information. The computers are on the desk, the LANs are coming about. The technology is there, and it's really, this is kind of taking advantage of the whole process. Downsizing, I think there's two implications here. First of all, there's a downsizing as far as the fleet is concerned. We're going to have fewer people doing personnel things. So that means that we're going to have the job easier for them to do so they can get in and out in a hurry. And that means it should be more streamlined, and it should be able to be done by a more junior person if they're following procedures. You shouldn't have to have people trying to to interpret policies that are being done up here. And also it means that obviously, as far as we're concerned in the Bureau, if we're going to try and do this project, now is the time. I kind of look at it as in all the action-adventure films, there's always that moment where the hero, he or she, has to slide under a door or under a car or something just before it closes or explodes or something. That's where we are right now. If you imagine doing this in another year or two after downsizing is even worse, or if you imagine when we're in the midst of Memphis, which is, by the way, the next point up here, all of that is going to make it much more difficult. So now is the time, and while it would be nicer to have done it prior to this, I think we have to go ahead with it. And the project activities we've been working with, we've assembled a team, and we'll let you know who those people are. Conducted research and training. We've talked with a lot of different people, a lot of different services, a lot of different commands. We've looked at all the technologies, we've looked at the processes and the systems, and I think we set up a pretty good one. We've devised a format, and you've got a copy of it there, and we'll go over that. We've created a review system, which you all will be a part of, and assembled resources and initiated a CD-ROM program. We'll get into that in more detail later on also. The assumptions, quality is a #1 driver. This came from TQL, so I would imagine you would think you'd have that slide up there, but it means more to us because we had to make a lot of decisions having to do with format and technology. Just the idea, for instance, if you look at that, if you've had a chance to look at your sample there, we've increased the font size and given a lot of white space to what you're going to see on the screen. Well, if we had to assume we're going to put this out on paper, that would have driven a whole lot of different things. So we had to just assume we were going to do the project right. We didn't want people to follow in behind us and have to do it over again and fix things up. So that's the quality is the #1 decision point in everything we tried to do. Working smart. Initially, this was set up as a 3-phase project where a whole other group of people later on would come and look at things like formatting and putting it on CD-ROM. And we decided we would try and devise a system where most of that was done for us, so that all we had to do was get the CD-ROM technology out there ahead of us, and when we were ready, we could capture that and put the information on there without having to spend any more time. We wanted to minimize the stress on the system. That basically means in your jobs and in the work that you do with the people that are on the team or in the work that you do, we wanted to make it easy for you to do it without having to spend a lot of time and without this being stressful. There are some minimum things, though. We needed the command supporting this, and I've got the full assurance from Admiral McKinney and from the people at the Executive Steering Committee that they're fully behind this, and I expect that you'll be seeing them getting involved in this. Asking you questions. That's what I posed to them, is that they needed to be involved pulling things at the same time we're trying to push the animal ahead. And also we're expecting that the team members would be able to get roughly 2 hours per day working on this. And obviously if you want to spend 4 hours on Tuesday instead of 2 on Monday and Tuesday, that's fine. But just this level of effort working with these people so that they can go about doing what we're doing. The new manual, what it will look like. First of all, we took a look at the organization. And I'm sure everyone here knows what an SSIC is, Standard Subject Identification Code. And if you're a Y or P, and you probably at some point had to memorize a large portion of those, we thought it made sense that we would organize our material here by SSIC. Maybe it's not the most perfect system, but it's something we have out there and it makes sense. So we had nobody that could tell us why the old manual looked the way it was. You know, basically there were some numbers that came up, and that's the structure that they went with. Well, we thought we'd want to have it so if a person wanted to find separations, for example, they'd know where to go, and that's where we're basing that. Secondly, we're going to do strategic merging. I spent a lot of time up front making sure that we were dealing here with content and not just format. And that's very clear at every step I got, that people wanted to fix the system, not just make it look pretty on top of things that were broken. So when we're talking here about strategic merging, what we're talking about is looking up and down within a particular SSIC and making sure that everything lines up and that we don't have duplication and that we have policies above and procedures below. And we'll look a little bit more at that. Information mapping. This is a technology that does two things. What everyone sees is a format. It's the format that this thing is going to be in, and you've taken a look at it maybe in your example. But that's about 20% of it. I wanted to have a technology so that when people had to review their policies, they had a way, a tool to get in and out to make decisions on, is this a good policy? Is it well written? Does it work with other things? And nobody could come up with a way that in the policy world where they evaluated policies and how they worked. I believe this technology, information mapping, gives our team the ability to make those kind of decisions as to how to improve the way the information, the policies, and the procedures are laid out for the people that have to use them. And lastly, CD-ROM, a storage mechanism and an information retrieval, and we'll talk more about that near the end of the presentation. SSIC, we're going to align, as I said, the MILPERS man and the other articles and instructions and policies and procedures by SSIC. An example here, we have 1910, the 1910 part is obviously enlisted separations. Well, what does that mean? First of all, it means that if you're going to look for separations, you don't look one place for a person who's bad and another place for a person who's just getting out of the Navy. You want to separate an enlisted person, you look to 1910. One place, and everything will be there. The 160 is what we call a map number, and that's what we're using right now as a terminology. It's part of the information mapping concept. And the 160 here would be for parenthood, for instance, and that's what we've got laid out in there. All the articles so far have been assigned SSIC codes. They can change, but we've got them there. We've got what are called SSIC cops for each SSIC. What it means is one of our team members who is in charge of each SSIC we're dealing with, and if we're going to move something into there or move something out or arrange information, that person will be the one to go to. So if you ever have any questions about where your article is going to fit inside a particular SSIC, this would be the person that you'd want to contact. And within each SSIC, all directives will be reviews, which brings up the strategic merging concept. With strategic merging, we want to eliminate duplication in policies and procedures, eliminate inconsistencies, and provide to the fullest extent possible one-stop shopping. What this means is that down the line, and this will probably be 10 or 15, 20 years, when you pick up your disk that has your policies and procedures on it, you won't have any longer the concept of this is an instruction, here's a manual next to it, here's a piece of paper bound by leather or whatever. It'll be a database of policies and procedures where you go to get the information you need. And the idea then is to do away with all the different places we're going to go to. An example of this, right now we have law, DOD, and SecNav as our governing policy. And then we have a myriad of different places where the procedures are held. And a lot of these are inconsistent. They'll tell you one thing in one place and another thing in another place. What we want to essentially do is come up with one-stop shopping with the military personnel manual, and in essence really make it a MilPERS disk, if you like, just to click away for any information you need in electronic format. Information mapping, the methodology we're going to use to accomplish this. First of all, it optimizes information processing. It was designed by somebody who spent several years researching how information gets into a person's brain and is utilized. And they've developed a whole methodology to make this the best way. This is a technology that's spreading throughout the government, spreading throughout the military, and is very big in a lot of the industry. And in fact, I think once you've walked away and worked a little bit with this, you'll start noticing other places where this is used. WordPerfect manuals, for instance, are information mapped. They may not use exactly the same format, but the concept is the same. And I think that WordPerfect for me is one of the best manuals I've worked with, and I think this may be the reason why. It's an analytical and organizational tool, and it supports team writing, which means that as we move along as a team pulling these things together, we can work on it with each other, help each other, and in fact it oftentimes helps that the person does not know the policy or procedure, because that is the person then we're writing to. If the person can't understand it out in the fleet, if a person here in the building can't understand it, the person in the fleet probably won't also. So we can work with each other and come up with something that's clear and easy to get across. It also supports online presentation. We were given formulas for how much information we can chunk together. That's terminology. And there's a certain number for a piece of paper, another number for online presentation. And with this, we can go ahead and move this towards the online presentation, so it's easy. One of the things, if you've worked with databases online, you realize that the information just kind of flows, and after a while, all the letters and digits just kind of blind you. You know, you start going into a deep trance. Well, what this does, it allows and it supports the idea of keeping you awake, alert, getting the information coming into you so you can utilize it. Here's some information. This was brought together by one of the telephone companies who evaluated it and was passed along. And without going into each one, I think you can see that there are a lot of just parametric reasons why this is a good policy, a good process. This is kind of the way it looks. I mentioned format, and again, I don't want to concentrate on it, but we have particular fonts that are used. We have a label area off on the left. We have lines, bullets, tables. All these are part of the tools that we use to help get the information across. But the bottom line is that it gives us the ability to come into a particular area, and first of all, each particular area is set aside for a particular type of information. There are different types of information, and each area will support that. This is a policy block, and this supports policy. If a person wants to look at policy, they can scan down here and say, there's policy, read it, and if they don't want to, they don't have to read anything else. And if you're looking at procedure, you go in and look at the procedure. And one of the things I think you'll find, we aimed it at the idea of a body in motion, somebody doing something. Not just saying, well, make sure you have these things. We want them to check that those things exist. The key here, though, is, again, that a person does not have to find these steps hidden in several different paragraphs. and put it together. And I think if you look at the before example in the demonstration before we get when we get to it, you'll see that you would have to look and change and go here and there and grab information to kind of assemble the overall process and steps that you're supposed to go through. We want to eliminate that. We want to go, here's what you do, you get in, you do it, you get out. Again, format, though, is just the tip of the iceberg. Most of it's organization and analysis. So as we're working with this, realize that that's what we're driving for, and that's the reason we're going with information mapping, not just because it's pretty. The methodology itself, research-based principles. These are the principles they came up with, and just to give you a few of the upfront ones, to give it a flavor of what we're working with here, and you may be getting some conversations going with this as you get more involved in this. Chunking, for instance. Right now, if you take a paragraph and you look at any standard paragraph and the way you were taught, it has a lead-in part, it has maybe some content in the middle, and then you have to transition to the next paragraph, and all that information all kind of flows together. What we do here is we do what's called a chunk. We take out discrete pieces of information, set it aside, as I mentioned, by itself. What is the policy? This is the policy. If you want to give some amplifying information, you say amplifying information. This is the amplifying information. You chunk it apart, you pull it apart, and that's what we'll be working with, those discrete blocks. So that means for you, if you're working with somebody from our team, that they're going to want to know, first of all, what are your procedures? And they're going to want to set those aside. They're going to want to know what are the other types of information. And that's how you can help them, is by preparing and thinking ahead of time to pulling apart what you're working with into these discrete components. Relevance, the idea that you don't put something in there if it doesn't belong. You know, one of the things we tend to find is that if you look through the military personnel manual without picking any one particular spot, you'll see all kinds of different mom and apple pie put in there. Nice to know things. We like to have people in the Navy. We don't want to get them out unless we really have to get them out. Well, obviously we know that. If we want to put something like that, we'll find a place to put it, but it's where it's relevant, not in with everything else. Labeling, we have particular types of labels, and I'll flash some of those up. The other ones all have to do with how we put together our information, and so it's prepared to be processed. There are two units of information that we deal with: information blocks and information maps. The block itself, as I mentioned, is a discrete component that has a certain amount of information in it, and it has a particular relevancy. It could be one sentence. It could be a picture. It could be a flow chart. It could be a table. But what it has to do with is that one particular piece of information by itself becomes a block. It's handled in a certain way, and in fact, for each type that we'll talk about in a second, it has a particular recommended way to handle that type of information. And they all go together to put into a map. And one of the things that you'll find is that with the demonstration here is there are several maps that have to do with the process. One that leads you into the overall subject matter, another that gets you started in the right place, and then the specific procedures you're going to do. So as we go into a particular SSIC, what will happen is we'll be designing the way this overall section will look, and we'll be working with maps, and we'll be asking you to identify the discrete components that make up the blocks that we'll be working with. We have labels, and I won't go into those other than that we have particular types of labels that we use in different circumstances. And we have information types. We'll start off with procedures. The first question we'll always ask, and everyone should be asking you, are what are the procedures here? What is somebody going to be doing? And as you're looking at your material, imagine a person moving through space, sitting at a desk, getting up, going to a filing cabinet, typing something in a computer. Imagine that person actually doing something. An example here again with our sample is at one point it says, check to make sure there's a page 13 entry. Well, before we kind of forced ourselves along the path, we simply had, there are things you had to have, page 13 entry. And we wanted to push it to the idea of have them check. Once they've done step 2, we'll go on from there. Processes and structures, concepts, principles, classifications, and facts. I won't go into those now. I want to get you in and out of here today and reduce the stress on the system. But those are various other types of information that you'll be using. Principles here are essentially your policies. So if you're going to be dealing with a policy, say from SecNav or OpNav, this is what it's going to be, basically the statement of what we have here. Classifications are types, facts are just straightforward. The Empire State Building is tall, that's a fact. You know, that's a straightforward concept. Concepts are more nebulous things that deal with color. The color blue is a nice color. And processes deal with the flow of procedures and steps. The training we went through, we had 20 people trained in a dedicated course in March. This is an expensive training. We checked around, we did a lot of research, we've asked a lot of people. Every person we talked to in the various branches of the military and various other places raved about this. They were like salesmen for the course, and we got it in here, and the people, I think, while they're still waiting to get their feet wet moving through it, once they do, will find this as an excellent tool. But training is critical. This is not the type of thing where we can sit down with you for an hour and make you an expert in information mapping so you can relieve somebody. So the bottom line is that if you're going to take a team member and move them someplace else, they need to have a replacement. There are seminars that are taught. They cost about $675 per person, and that's got to be part of the overall management structure here. A demonstration. If you want to take a look at your sheet there, listed separations, MPM 1910, military personnel 19. This is essentially the way this would show up on the screen. Now it may be a little bit different. Admiral Tobin would like to have different font changes and more colorful things. He wants to move this so it's down the line easier for the people to work with, and we agree with that. We'll be looking at those kind of things. We're going to have the responsible office up here. The idea here is not so that we raise our hand and get shot at. Hopefully this will be a good system to begin with. But this way there won't be a lot of phone calls where you're spending your time saying, well, this is the wrong person to check with. Here's who you want to go to. So the responsible office. Governing directive. In this case, the governing directive is a SecNav instruction. We used this particular area because it had already had a scrub for content. And they'd gone through in the ADCEP area with PERS 8 and PERS 2 coming up with what they thought was a pretty good scrub of the content itself. And with that in mind, we thought this would be a good way then to test our technology. And what we're going to try and do here, as I mentioned, strategic merging, is end up with a DoD instruction, which states what the policies are, a SecNav instruction, which is really just a cover page saying to everybody, we're going to go with DoD, and here it is. And then we get down to the procedures. And that's where we have control, and this is where it is right here. Any chance that we have, moving all the way up to SecNav, where we own a particular policy or procedure or instruction or manual, we want to take that on. If a manual is too large to handle right now, then we'll set it aside, and later on, after we've done this segment of this process, we can later on migrate that into this database. But initially what we're looking at here is the idea that we want to capture as much as we can, do away with everything at the top that is especially procedures and conflicting, and essentially have policies at the top, procedures inside of our manual. And procedures handled in a way that's very straightforward and just references these are the governing. If you look at the policy, we think this is a lot more straightforward and less apple pie than would tend to exist in most places in the MilPERS man. So I think that kind of helps along there. Now with that in mind, this is also going to give you a quick little demonstration of what hypertext is. We'll talk about that in a second. The idea is that the person, there could be several different places, like for instance the SecNav instruction here. You could click on that, and actually the SecNav instruction will come up on your screen and you can read it and go back. If you have a form, you can click on that, it'll come up and you can print it off. Those are all things we're going to build into the system. But for right now, I just want to demonstrate moving and navigating through this. You can see here that the reasons for separation is green. Normally is a different color when you deal with these kind of links and jumps. And what I want to do is just demonstrate WordPerfect 6 for Windows happens to support this. You can see the way I've gone from an I-beam here, hopefully, to a pointer. You're over an area where you can do a hyperlink. We click on that. And this is a little bit slower. It's just it's not designed to handle this specifically. But it's going to jump us now to that particular 1910-40. Okay, so we show up here. Again, we have the responsible office. And now we're going to have a set of procedures that take us to the right spot. In this case, we're going to want to find the one for parenthood. Okay, there's parenthood. Again, it's green. Again, if I take my pointer, I can click over here. And it takes us finally to the point with parenthood. When we get there, and I can start talking about it, one of the things that Admiral McKinney made clear, he saw this initially, and his concern was it looked too sterile. He brought up the point that when he liked to go into a dictionary, he would find a lot of different factoids that he didn't expect to find. So what he wants to make sure is, as we design this system, that we have the type of flavors that, say, a CO or an XO would pick up as they're going in. Because this was particularly, we aimed this right here at the PN3. What this brings up is that as you're working with our team, and what I've instructed my team to do is to make sure that we keep in mind 3 audiences. And as you're working with this, you're going to want to remember the 3 audiences, and I'll bring them up again. The first one is a PN3. If they're working with the procedure, you want to make this clear and straightforward and precise for a PN3, YN3, somebody out of an A school to do their job. On the other hand, we want to make sure that for the people up here, we make ourselves happy. So we're dealing with policy wonks. We want to make sure that we're going to find the information we need up here. That's the second audience. The third audience is a CO or XO. And the last thing the Admiral said at the Executive Steering Committee meeting on Friday was, to all the people assembled there, I want you to get personally involved and make sure that we don't make this sterile and that the CO-XO is taken care of. So I would keep that in mind. Now what that means is that we don't put, after step 2, something for the XO or CO. That's still a straight flow, it's chunked, it's right there, it's the procedures, here's what you do. But you may want to have up here, or in some other spot in your SSIC area, a set of rules and guidelines. And in fact, for this area, there is a set of places for rules and guidelines. Looking further at this, you can see, oops, roll high. First couple steps here, does a person meet these, does this circumstance exist? Comes down to a yes or no answer. If it's yes, you go one place. If it's no, you go someplace else. This is something we add here. We had it before we briefed the Admiral, stop, the person does not meet the requirements. That's what first raises hackles. We want to make sure that we just don't have somebody stop. We tell them why. In this case, they're going to go off somewhere and learn about how to counsel somebody for a problem. So it'll take them to the area for counseling. And the next place, if you look down, you'll see there's a place dealing with the form. It'll take them over and help them learn about the form and how to put it in so they can later on go about. But that's kind of the way the system works. It's got the format, but I think you can see, and especially if you compare it to the first thing, that if you want to find out how to do it, you're a PN3, you look in there, here are the steps. You've got all the things that you need, you assemble it, you do it, it's done, it's over with. If you're an XO, you find a place to go through the process to find out what you need to do to counsel the person, whatever. Then you pass it on, and you can feel comfortable that the person that's going to be working on this knows how to do the job now. It's not going to be assembling and putting together all different types of information from the people up here who have great ways of putting together long paragraphs, because that's the way we're taught. Step 1, step 2, step 3. How we plan to get there. First of all, I'm going to go over a concept of operations, introduce the team, project management, the system, the resources, the awareness, and project timeline. We wanted to make sure that as this document came together, we had a consolidated way that this all brought together one viewpoint. So that's why we came up with a team. We trained that team on how to do the job. The Air Force, one of their lessons learned was, and when they saw information mapping, they said they had looked at it up front, but the way they went about it, their concept of operations precluded it. It would have been grossly expensive because they had all of their things written out by everybody in the field. So by having one group of people trained in how to do information mapping and having the central viewpoint of how to be ruthless about pulling this together, how to put it together in one voice, how to work with each other, that gives us the ability to do the information mapping and still work with you, the subject matter experts in Cognizant Codes. So we have the prime team, and within each department and within each one of your particular policies, we know that you own those. PERS 2 owns certain policies, PERS 4 owns other ones. Each code has policies and articles that they own. So within that, this team member becomes one of your assets. It's your system, works for your boss or yourself. And then you take with what you want to do and you put together the best system that you can. Recognizing that we have Cognizant Codes and subject matter experts. We have interested parties that may be inside of the department or outside of the department, whatever. But we pull those people together, and for that particular policy, that's how we zoom through the process and make it work. But the key here is they work for you. And I'm going to basically at that point become sort of a technician on the side, making sure the system is working. I'm not going to be walking around saying, hey, PERS, whatever, you're not doing your job, because if you're not doing your job, it's your system, it's your policies, and we deal with that in the normal military manner with admirals and whatever. And obviously in each department, then this is replicated and works in its own way. Now the team, we have 2 team members from each functional area. Those are the functional areas. We have, for instance, for 2B, we have, for 2, we have so many different policies in there. We broke it down into 2B enlisted, 2B officer, and 2C. 2C still ends up with the largest number of policies of anybody, over 100 policies, just in the MilPERS man itself. We have 3 working groups. Format and BUPERS awareness group that deals with primarily with the format. Operations, which is going to kind of keep the system running right, hopefully, and CD-ROM working group. Handling miscellaneous codes and outside BUPERS is Eileen Parmenter over here. On the PERS 2B enlisted side, we have Senior Chief Pennington. We had Master Chief Boyum, but she just got out of the Navy, which shocked us all, and we miss her. Probably have to be replaced, I would imagine. From the 2B side, officer, we have Lieutenant Mike Martin and Lieutenant Sean Hamilton. PERS 2C, Lieutenant Commander Gene Listava and Lieutenant Matt Haig. From PERS 3, we have Jan Jelly and Diana White. PERS 4, we have Lieutenant Ed Sullivan and Master Chief Cheryl Smith. From PERS 6, we have Lieutenant Tim Harris and Lieutenant Eugenia Young. PERS 8, we have Lieutenant Chris Imbach and Senior Chief Jose Lacuna. And PERS 9, we have Lieutenant Commander Jan Jordan and Chief Brennan, Kay Brennan. So those are the team members, and those are the people inside your area that you're going to be working with. If, for instance, you're from outside the command, you'll be working with Eileen Parmenter and working on that, pulling that all together. Project management, I'm going to be coming up here periodically as part of the reserves, and also I'll be monitoring this by night by remote modem down in Roanoke, Virginia. So we're going to stress some more technology here by putting that together. And we've got a command suite set up where I'll be tapping into. Also, if you need help in general, I have an assistant, that's Lieutenant Sullivan, so you can contact him and work with him. The system, first of all, we have 3 phases. Phase 1 is a review and map, and we'll get into detail because that's our area. The other phase, the second phase, is legal review and shop, and the third phase is smooth for publication. The reason we did this was recognizing the fact that practically everything is going to have to go through legal. And we didn't want to have one place where the whole thing could be bottled up and we couldn't see or work on any progress. So the bottom line is, we're going to work on phase 1. And then we're going to send things up to legal, and as far as we're concerned, we've done our job for the time being, and we're going to help legal do theirs if they need it, but basically they have theirs up there to do. Phase 3 then will pick up once they come back down, and that's where we prep it for CD-ROM. But what we're worried with here is phase 1. Review packages. And prior to a review package, the first thing that will happen, as I mentioned, is the SSIC cop will sit down and will assemble a map or a picture of how all the things will fit together for that SSIC. And that it will include instructions, SecNav, OpNav, DoD instructions, all the other different things, nav admins, anything else that exists out there. And then they'll sit down, they'll put together a package. The package essentially looks like this. Blue folder, you can't quite see it, but it's a yellow slip of paper on the cover. And inside, on one side, will be a miniature set of instructions, and also there'll be a inventory list, which tells you everything that's in there. And then there will actually be the old MILT-PERS man and any other things that we can put in there. All the other instructions. If there's a manual that's referenced, we'll put a cover sheet. Essentially, this should have all the assets that you need to do your job as a subject matter expert or as a COG to review it. And these will be flowing around. We didn't want to shock anyone, go too shocking with the color, but we wanted something that at least captured your attention. So hopefully you realize this is out there, and that's what they are. Essentially, we're aiming at 2 weeks for a COG SME review, which means in a 2-week period of time from the time you have it, in that period of time, you'll go through and do everything you need and conduct that. Then we have the subject matter expert, and your point of contact will sit down and actually spend about an hour together talking it out. He or she will be asking questions, trying to determine the best way to handle and map this for you. And then for the next 2 weeks, essentially 2 hours a day at it, they'll be going about doing the mapping itself. Then we pass it out for review and shop by the subject matter experts, interested parties, again 2 weeks, and then a COG chop. We're working with the concept of gates. Once they're done with this, gate 1 has been passed through. Gate 2, gate 3, gate 4, gate 5. Gate 6 essentially is a legal chop, and again, we won't be worrying about that. So you have 5 gates to get these through with each one. Now, as we're going to do, we're going to have parallel processing, which means that they'll be passing essentially 1 a week here to begin with, and then up to 2 a week, and going like that. The idea then is that with all this going on, you can see why we don't want to have every time that one of our team members passes one of these out, they sit down and spend a couple of hours working with you, saying the same things over and over again, getting into arguments about is information mapping the best way, or should I put this? You know, the bottom line is we want to be able to have these flowing, trickling through as part of a systematic approach, and they come back in, then we can go ahead and do our part of it. Initially, as I said, 1 package per week and step up to 2. At full speed, that would give us about 18 articles per week. Your review, Hopefully you can focus on quality and improvement, process improvement. Not just the format and the words. What we want you to do is ask, is this the best way? Is it still necessary? Does this belong here? And this is what the Admiral really said he wants us to do. He gave us an example of when he was at the recruiting command. They looked at the fact that they were thinking of keeping the processing stations open a half hour later each day because they couldn't get the people through in time. And then they went through and did a TQL pat at it and realized that they had a stack of paper each person had to go through that was this thick. The Marines had 2 pieces of paper. We had one place we had them signed 17 different times that they don't like drugs. I have them signed it once, and that we know they don't like drugs. The bottom line is that they fixed the problem by cutting down on the amount of paperwork. And you have the prerogative here of saying, let's throw this out. He wants us to be ruthless. He wants us to improve it. We want to have a fleet out there that is better able to do their job because you've done yours as part of this. Remember your audience. Remember I said 3 different audiences here. Primarily the PN3. We want to kind of keep us happy up here. And also remember the CO and XO. If you deal with them, put them in a separate spot. They'll scan, they'll look for that information on their own. Review the governing directives. Find your SecNav and OpNavs. And remember, if we have a SecNav or an OpNav that we own, that's fair game. To chop it, pull the procedures out, pull them down. We've also set up procedures that we're going to work on to work with the Marines. It turns out that most times we have SecNav instructions, it's because we have to worry about our Marine friends. So in that case, we want to make sure that we plan ahead so that if we change something, it doesn't hurt them. But still, it's fair game. If we can solve a problem, improve a process, let's go for it. Review the associated directives and procedures, pull them all together. We're hopefully going to have here identified for you and in our database all the enlisted transfer manual, distribution manual, DGMs, PD, all the different nav admins, anything else that belongs here. If we don't capture something, let us know. Add it in there, pull it together. We want to have one place, one stop for everything. Stick to content. Don't try and rewrite anything. If you want to scribble notes, fine. But the writing is going to be done by the team. Now you can give them a hand when you sit down and work with them, but the bottom line is don't waste time before that meeting when you sit down with them trying to rewrite the thing. Because we've got people trained to do that. And if you want to give them a hand, if you want to work something out, that can be worked out between the 2 of you when you work on it. And also be timely, please. Remember, we're going to have hundreds of these things flowing around the building. So your support in this can really help a lot. The resources, we have a command center, room 4718. We've got it set up with hardware and software. We've got about 7 computers up there. We've got WordPerfect set up on the machines and software from information mapping to help us do our job. We're trying for a printer. If anyone out there has someplace in the closet a LaserJet 3 printer, that would be useful. We're still fishing around for that one. And Microsoft Project, a copy of Microsoft Project. Put in a little plug here. Those are the couple things we're looking for. But other than that, we have the tools up there. We have some databases and the things that we need to put this together. And you'll probably be going up there for meetings. We set it aside so you can conduct meetings up there with your POC. And that's where they're going to go out to actually work together with the team to write these things. Timeline, approximately 650 articles, rough order of magnitude then. We have a lot of other things too. But if we're looking at, say, PERS 2C with 100, it's about 50 weeks. We're looking at essentially at October 95 for a first release. And we'll show you why, a couple reasons in a little bit. This is one of the big ones, CD-ROM. Going to look at the benefits, the cost savings, the challenges, and a survey we took, and also a plan of action we're moving ahead with. First of all, the benefits, ease of use. Part of the research we did, we found out and talked with some people, and it was pointed out to us that the people that are coming out of high school now, our future YN3s and PN3s, are already using computers in a lot of their high schools. They're working with CD-ROM. This is going to become second nature to them. So it's not like we have to build something and train. We're going to do training, yes, but a lot of this is going to be out there. It's easy to use. Search and indexing. We're talking here, I showed you a little bit about doing a hyperlink, hypertext. The ability, it's a 3-dimensional navigation. You can set up where you want to go and move across throughout the document. It's like an index, but you can set up so that you can move and jump anywhere. Also, we're going to try and have full text searches, which means if you want to deal with pregnancy and you're not sure exactly which article, especially early on before we get it all down to one database, you can have on that one disk all the instructions for the Navy to deal with personnel policy, and within about a minute come up with all the different places in there where pregnancy is mentioned, and then you can sort. We had NTSA come in and show us a demonstration of the NWPs. They put in mine warfare, shallow water, Within about 45 seconds, we had the articles in there, all the different NWP things that deal with those particular subjects. The technology is there, it's just a matter of capturing it. Large capacity, to give you an idea, if we take, let's see, this wall here, about out to the center of the room, go about eight shelves high, one CD will hold that. So in most cases when they put out a CD, they go shopping for things to fill it up. You know, let's put on all the UCMJ and all the military law codes in there, just so we have something so we fill up all the digits. Also minimal storage. A single CD holds 300,000 pages of text. That does not include if we have a lot of graphics, but I don't think we're going to have a lot of graphics. We'll have some. One CD can store up to 2,500 pounds. So for our reducing the amount of paper out in the fleet, I think this will definitely help. 120 feet of space. And this is a big thing, especially with the forms. Just imagine, if you will, completely changing the way we deal with forms. Never on a ship again with this, as far as personnel world is concerned, we ever have to order forms. And you won't have to order a stack of them, use one of them once every year. You know, because what you'll do is you'll click over there and you'll be able to print it off. So this is part of the savings that we'll be capturing. Ease of updates. We want to have these go out quarterly. That's what our figures look at right now, and that's what most people with CD-ROMs do. The other thing, though, is that we're hoping to be able to have a system so that using something like BuPERS Access or some other sort of electronic medium, we can have real-time updates. So if you change something here tonight at midnight, assuming the person gets in and does their update, they'll know, and in fact, when they call it up on the screen, they won't know the difference. They'll just see the latest up there. That's some of the exciting things that are out there that we're going to explore putting into this. And it is the future. Not so much CD-ROM. CD-ROM is a storage medium, and really it's more the indexing, the hypertext, the ability to gather the information and store it in one place. Later on it might migrate somewhere else. By the way, as far as we're concerned here, in places like CNET, you know, the idea is this could be put on a jukebox, so as far as the network is concerned, everybody could access it and get the information. Cost savings, we did just a real rough cost-benefit analysis, and we're going to follow this up with a more detailed one. But initially looking at 12 manuals that we produce here in the building, cost about $602,000 a year now to put out those 12 manuals. On CD it would cost $166,000. So the savings are there initially. Obviously, and I want to make this clear, we did not include in this particular benefit analysis the support staff. We want to do this right too and look at the way it's done right now and end up with a way to handle this. One of the things we're exploring is having a taking from the systems world. NAVC, for instance, has the configuration control board for ships. And we want to look at the idea of having a configuration control board for policies. And tying that together with the support staff, any policy changes here would be looked at by all the people who need to know about it. And then it would flow immediately from there into the support staff that would put it out electronically. The challenges for CD-ROM, first of all, it'll be the largest Navy release coming out of our home here. So we want to make sure it looks good. This is going to be the first one that goes out to every closet in the Navy, because it's not just all the tactical pubs or it's not just all the supply pubs. It's everybody who deals anything with personnel will be getting this. So it behooves us to do a good job on it. Secondly, we have to look at the selection of the viewer, the engine, the thing that you put on the CD-ROM itself that displays the information. We have to make sure it has certain capabilities and characteristics, and that the authoring system that we use to develop it is user-friendly. Those things exist out there, and it's just a matter of making sure we have a good program to come up with the best product. And we have to address the fact that we have a minimum Navy configuration. Admiral McKinney has gone ahead with a tentative decision, basically coming from this survey, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. We went out, and thanks to BuPERS Access survey, they want to make sure we let you know they're the InfoNet of the Navy, that we did a survey back in April for about 2 weeks. And during that survey, we captured 4,139 people who said they use a military personnel manual. And with that, what we found, essentially 33% said that they did not have any compact discs available to them, machines. 37% said they had them at the command but not in their workspace, and 30% said they had them in the workspace. What's interesting is if you take another look at this also, 93% of the people who had CD on board the ship or had access to CD had a 386 machine or better. What that means to us is one of the big things we were looking at as far as the Navy's minimum configuration was whether or not they'd be in the Windows world. OpNav has an instruction which basically says that from now on the preferred medium of choice for distribution of large material will be CD-ROM. They point out that the minimum configuration is 286 with 1 mega RAM on it and a few other things. which really constrains the ability to display information. Well, the Admiral said, we're going to build towards the future. We're not going to put out a machine, spend a couple of years putting out a product that goes towards the past. So we're going to essentially let them know ahead of time, but move towards a 386 Windows environment. Plan of action, essentially, the first thing that's essential is a requirements-driven project. We've got a copy of the RFP that the Air Force put out. We're going to try and make sure that we put together a good plan out of here to capture the right materials. Full cost-benefit analysis, we're in the process of gathering that information and doing that. Decision paper will be put together for Admiral McKinney so that he can make the official and go ahead with both the use of CD-ROM and 386 as our preferred minimum configuration. We're going to start off with a transition period. Our goal, if we can put this together, we went around and around about how can we put out a CD when we put out our new product, and the very first time the world sees it, it's just on CD. You know, the people are going to scream and holler, and probably rightfully so. Well, the idea was brought up, why don't we capture what we have right now, put that out on CD, that'll be our transition period. That can be the optional. So we're going to move towards the idea of taking what we now have on a hard drive down in 2628 in Eileen Parmenter's shop, capture that, put that with a couple of other manuals that hopefully can pay for the process, onto a CD, let the world know with the next distribution of the Milpers man that it's out there. That'll represent our transition period, CD1, which will pull us towards October 95. It'll give us a chance to do education and awareness. We want to put together a lot of articles. By the way, there'll be information mapped for the various magazines and places we put them. But the idea is to prepare the people for what they're going to be seeing in October of 95 when this comes about. And then a full release CD2 in October 95. That's kind of what we're shooting for then, is to have the two come together sort of in a Desert Shield fashion, CD-ROM being our logistics, getting them out there front for the sweep, having it ready. How you can support the process? First of all, from the management side, active and visible management. I don't want this to be a program that dies. I had one person, I won't mention his name, Senior Chief Pennington, I won't mention your name, but when he first got on board this project, he came up to me at one point. I know he had some reservations up front, but after he got a taste of what we were going to try and accomplish, he said, you know, I've been staying awake last night thinking about, I've been dreaming about this since I first came in the Navy. This is your chance to leave a legacy behind of what the Navy is going to be like. There's not many chances where you and your job have a chance to make this kind of an impact on the way the world looks. So this is your chance to be part of that. So becoming active, making this a project that is not just another one of the ones floating around the building will certainly help. We want to inject the COXO view. And again, that's what Admiral McKinney said to the top level people there in the room, the captains and admirals. Make sure we think of them and that we have them cogently thought of in our blocks of information. And support the team 2 hours at least per day. The people I know are kind of gun-shy about the fact that they all, as I said, are good people. They've got work to do. And at the same time, this is another one added on. I think this could be one of those things where, again, for posterity's sake and the legacy you're going to leave behind, this ought to be a project that has the priority. We're reinventing the way the Navy does personnel policies. It's not just another piece of paper flowing. As far as COGS and SMEs, obviously a thorough review. And again, from your standpoint, as you're doing this, if you go through and make sure you come up with something for our team members who are simply going to be, in a lot of ways, editors and putting this together, you come up with the way that is the best way to do the job. You come up with a process that works. You come up with a way where you save an hour or two here or there. That's going to have implications thousands of hours down the line into the future. Take the time now, leave that behind, and someday when you're out on a ship as a CO or an XO, you can appreciate what you've done. A timely review. We want to have these flowing, coming back in and out, and if we have to start going looking for them, that's just extra time eaten away out of limited time. And a commitment to quality and improvement. Resources, I mentioned a couple. I won't go begging anymore for a LaserJet 3 printer or for Microsoft Project, but if they're out there anywhere, we'd appreciate it. And also the CD-ROM program. I would really like to be excited about finding somewhere where we come up with a program where it's handled almost like a NAVC acquisition process here, and we come up with a CD-ROM so that the troops are ready. When we have the manual, the CD-ROM is out there for it. We've come up with Policy Warriors as our nickname for the team. We have the Policy Warfare Command Center up in 4718. Hopefully I'll have a cup of coffee for you up there when you have any questions and have to work up and stop with us. Do you have any questions?
For some of the short commands who don't have CD-ROMs, about 66% or 2/3, why can't you hook up a bank of CD drives to Bupers Access? And people who already have modems can access the CD-ROMs through Bupers Access.
Those are things to be considered. I think the bottom line, though, is that we're talking about first of all, since we're going to be rewriting the whole way the world is done, people are going to have to initially, especially, be spending a lot of time working with the system. They're going to be doing everything differently, or at least wondering if they're doing things differently. So there's just not enough, not enough computer time where we could have everybody tying up the lines that long. I think the bottom line is that the fleet is going to have to recognize this is no longer a nice to have. I was surprised. I followed computers along from the time when you had to, spend months getting one computer, one PC, and nowadays it's like let's buy 850 of them. And I think the fleet is going to have to recognize that CD-ROM has already matured that far along. It's really out there. It costs like $200 to install one, so I'm not saying that it's a nothing, but at the same time I support the Admiral's view that let's move ahead. This is something that I think the Navy needs. Question? Sure.
Can I use your sample demonstration?
Sure. Definitely.
I know it's a guide, but one of the things we definitely do for the admin's processing it, and in the case of parenthood, one of the key factors is the member in a CREO group rating. Is that going to automatically key in?
Well, if you tell them that, yes. I mean, that's part of, those are the things that we want to make sure we do install there.
Right.
So as part of your review, you would put that in there.
If they're drawing SRB,
Sure.
and it would automatically key in, not eligible because of SRB, that type of thing.
Right, and I think that one of the things that we didn't show there is that there would be a follow-on step if the person is being separated, which would actually accomplish the separation. And I think those would be where those questions would take place. But we do want to make sure when any article deals with a material that persons like yourself get a chance to input those type of materials.
So my basic question is going to be like a cross-reference. Like you've got it on the top, it says, okay, you need to call PERS 252 for this policy about the separation. But like the SRB falls into a different section, and so with the CREO group, are those cross-references also included?
When it gets to a particular step that deals with SRB or CREO group, there will be a step there that will ask the person to check, and if they do have to be looked at for that particular circumstance, you'd have a place to go to, and it would tell them to do that. Yeah, we want to have a checklist. The bottom line is that we don't want to have things falling through the cracks, and those are exactly the type of inputs we're looking for. So when we do have that spot, if you get a chance to see it, make sure you do first of all. And then if it doesn't show up there, let us know, and those are the type of things we want to have. We do want to have it simple, step 1, step 2, step 3. Make sure everything's done, get out of there. The person's been separated. Other questions?
I have a question. Where there are possible differences of policy between DOD and Navy, are you going to highlight those in the policy areas?
I think that would be appropriate.
Okay. Secondly, you talked about you would have the capacity to include flow diagrams to show processes. Is your intent to do that?
As much as possible. Yeah, exactly. We want to make this come alive. We don't want it to be a bunch of words. I think that's what Admiral Tobin was talking about. And we can do that with the systems we're talking about. We can work with bitmaps and everything else and put them in there.
All right. How do you plan to deal with immature processes then that aren't yet approved or don't have all the things worked out yet?
I would think that what we want to try and do, we talked initially about the idea of looking at 3 stages. Things that we could tackle right now without any real problems, things that we could tackle with a little bit of work and sweat, things that were just too large, and those would be put into a to-do file that we'd look at later on. I would try and aim at the middle. If you can do it with some work in the next year and a half or so, start planning those ahead of time and try and capturing those as best you can. And this is an iterative process. We're trying to meet a baseline. We're creating a baseline of October 95. But as with a ship, you know that you're going to later on have better missile systems. You make sure you plan for those to be integrated later on down the line.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I do. At this point in time, at the initial drafting point, can we bring other directives in to the MIL-PERS man now, or are we going to strictly work with the information that's currently in the MIL-PERS man?
Are you saying, are we going to produce something next month that was brought in and put it into hers now? No.
I'm saying, as we draft right now, looking at any publications that support our program, when we go to redraft the MIL-PERS man articles now that are under our cognizance, we can go ahead and take material that's not currently in the MIL-PERS man but is a part of our program and work that in.
Not only can you, I'm encouraging you very strongly to do that. I mean, the idea is we do want to come up with a single database, a place where information is. Now, as the question was asked about the advancement manual, that's too large, we feel, for us to, on top of everything we're doing. On one hand, he's saying you're being too ambitious. On the other hand, why don't you take on the advancement manual? What we're going to try and do is take on something just reasonably over-ambitious.
You know, and in that case, we're talking about a baseline. If you've got instructions, whether they be OpNav, SecNav, other manuals, other instructions, we do want to, within this time frame, reduce the number of instructions by 50%. So we encourage you to bring those in. All we're saying is that for the large ones that are too tough, we're not about to try and tackle those and choke on them. So we'll put something in there. We'll recognize that they exist. We'll say, if you want something from this area, see this manual. But other than that, we'll leave that for some future date, and within your area, you can worry about updating those later.
Which belong to somebody else in OpNav, but for which we may see an opportunity to cancel them. How are you going to deal with the clashes if we write something in this manual, they don't cancel theirs, or their instruction or policy says something different?
I would first of all assume that the climate is going to become very ruthless out there, that you're going to have a lot of people supporting the idea of cutting things in instructions, because it really is coming down the line. I know when we're working with Pat Townsend over at the OpNav, SecNav world, she's getting ready for our response to how we're going to handle that. So I think a lot of other people are going to want to do that also. And the general climate, I think, is going to be such that if you want to work with them on that, you can. The Marines, when we talk with them, were willing to work with us on that same concept also. So I can't give you a pat answer. Those are the areas where you're on the fringes, and it's your management expertise that, you know, how you want to handle that. But I would also encourage you there to try and get those down. In 3 years, they're going to ask us how many instructors we have in the Navy today, how many did you have then? And I think if you can help them move in that direction, you'll be a welcome addition to the process.
I had a follow-on.
Sure.
In looking at a situation like that, can we, in referencing a directive, for instance, that there may be an interface between something that's in my program and something that's outside my program, and that the manual that is under the other portion of that program is key, but we're obviously not going to be working that right now to draw it in because it doesn't belong to us. Mm-hmm. Can it still be available? Can we have it scanned so that it's on the CD?
Oh, we intend, first of all, to capture everything that we can. And initially, one of the things I didn't mention, by having the CD1 program, that will allow us to get the text hopefully in there. I'd rather not scan. We're trying to stay away from scanning.
Okay.
Because scanning doesn't support full text searches. But the idea is to try and get everything on there, and at least have all the personnel policy directives manuals on there. So that will be the goal, to capture all those. And you can reference those, and you can say, here they are. Just as I mentioned, we had SecNav instruction up there, and you can click on it and go there.
Right.
We want to set those up. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions?